Now, Israel acts to prevent an irreversible threat, and the condemnation is immediate. This is the definition of hypocrisy.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Mr. President, for 47 years, the Islamic regime in Iran has led crowds in chanting, March bar Israel, March bar America. Mr. Iravani, do you want to translate these chants? Your leaders have been chanting it for years in public events, in your parliament. March bar Israel, March bar America. They mean death to Israel, death to America. Israeli and American flags were painted on roads so they could be trampled. Our flags were burned in public squares. This is not the anger of a radical fringe. It is state-sanctioned hatred. And while those March bar chants echoed, uranium was enriched, centrifuges span, missiles were built, facilities were buried deep underground. It was never just empty rhetoric. It was preparation for action. But today, alongside our ally, the United States, we act to stop it. Israel stands before you today, having acted with the United States to confront and stop an existential threat before it became irreversible. The operation targets nuclear infrastructure, ballistic missile sites, the machinery of repression that fuels terror across our region. We did not act of impulse. We did not act of aggression. We acted out of necessity because the Iranian regime left no reasonable alternative. This joint effort will continue for as long as the threat remains. We thank President Trump and acknowledge the close cooperation between Israel and the US, which has brought the alliance between our countries to an all-time high in peace and in war. Let us be clear about what we are confronting. This regime has built nuclear weapons in blatant disregard of international law and UN resolutions. It has brutally murdered its own citizens and crushed dissent. It's happened now as we speak in cities in Iran. It has expanded missile arsenals and armed proxies across the region. It has openly declared its intention to erase Israel from the map. Now, as it faces consequences, it is launching missiles and drones across the region, endangering the UAE, where a Pakistani citizen, unfortunately, was killed. Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq. As we speak, in the last hour, a rocket targeted the city of Tel Aviv. Civilians, they don't target military bases. Civilians struck a building in Tel Aviv. An innocent woman was killed, and 21 people were injured. This is a regime that destabilizes wherever it reaches. It spreads violence outward while crushing freedom at home. It is not reacting. It is expanding. It is a machinery of radicalism that does not recognize borders. Mr. President, diplomacy was exhausted. Iran was required to stop enriching uranium, stop heavy water projects, stop developing nuclear-capable missiles, and allow full inspections. Iran did none of it. Instead, it fortified its nuclear facilities so we cannot get to them, accelerated missile production, and continued to fund terror. Since the last operation in the summer, they spent billions on their proxies. The resolutions were clear. The strategy was just as clear. Delay, delay, delay. But we will not be played. And it's simple what they were planning. They were building the means to corner us, to force an irreversible reality with our backs against the wall. That is not a future Israel will accept. No responsible nation should. This operation is guided by clear objectives: eliminate immediate threats, dismantle the nuclear program, destroy its ballistic missile production, neutralize naval threats, break the proxy network that destabilizes the region. The operation was carried out in order to protect the people of Israel within the framework of the ongoing armed conflict between Israel and Iran, in line with the UN Charter and in accordance with international law. Our forces stand ready to stop extremism armed with nuclear weapons. To the soldiers of the IDF, our boys and girls, my son, my daughter, we salute you. You stand like lions defending our people. An entire nation stands behind you. We have heard the condemnation from few member states, from the Secretary General, but we all know that escalation did not begin today. It began when Iran armed proxies and exported terror, expanded missiles and drones, advanced its nuclear program in violation of its commitments, turned on its own people, beating, imprisoning, executing. Where was the outrage of the UN? Where were the consequences? Now, Israel acts to prevent an irreversible threat, and the condemnation is immediate. This is the definition of hypocrisy. Some call this aggression. We call it necessity. We call it survival. Mr. President, history has taught us never to ignore those who openly call for our destruction. When a regime says it will destroy Israel, when it chants death to Israel, when it promises to wipe Haifa and Tel Aviv off the map, we believe it. We genuinely believe it. When we see those hundreds of ballistic missiles that they are launching to Israel, we believe the threats. We do not ignore them. We do not gamble with our survival. We act. Now let me address the brave people of Iran. You are not our enemies. This operation is not directed at you. It is directed at a regime that has silenced you, imprisoned you, and invested in missiles and uranium while your economy suffers. You deserve better. It is this regime, the Basij, the Revolutionary Guard, who have dragged your country into isolation. The world does not fear a free Iran. It fears a radical regime armed with nuclear weapons and driven by extremism. Your future should not be defined by those who chant for death. As President Trump has said, the Iranian people deserve dignity, security, and the chance to shape their own destiny. We are thinking about you. You are seen. You are not alone. The future of Iran belongs to its people. We stand with you. Mr. President, this week, Jewish families all around the world celebrate Purim. Many Israelis will do so now in a bomb shelter. The story of Purim happened more than 2,500 years ago, in the same place, in ancient Persia. An evil minister by the name of Haman sought to wipe out the Jewish people. And it began with words, with chants. It became a decree. It could have become a genocide. But Queen Esther refused to remain silent. She stepped forward, she spoke up, she acted before it was too late. That is the lesson we learned. It is not only an ancient lesson, it is a modern one. Last week, I stood at the gates of Auschwitz with dozens of UN ambassadors. We stood in a place that shows what happens when radicalism and extremism grows and no one stops it in time. Before the Holocaust, some leaders, serious leaders, believed that they could calm aggression with concessions. They were completely wrong. Giving in did not stop evil. It strengthened it. Winston Churchill understood what Queen Esther understood long before him. When destruction is declared and weapons are being prepared and assembled, leaders must act, not later, now. Today, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu understand that same lesson. For decades, the Iranian regime has built missiles, enriched uranium, armed proxies, and spread terror far beyond its borders. This regime is not only Israel's enemy. It is an enemy of stability, an enemy of every peace-loving nation. In this joint operation, Israel and the US are acting together, not because we see conflict.
The chamber had barely settled when Ambassador Danny Danon delivered his closing warning to the Security Council. A warning that echoed far beyond the walls of the United Nations. After decades of chants calling for the destruction of Israel and America after years of uranium enrichment, buried facilities, expanding missile programs, and regional proxy warfare, Israel, alongside the United States, had acted. Not impulsively, not recklessly, but as he framed it, out of necessity. Danon did not begin with technical language or diplomatic nuance. He began with memory, with words shouted in public squares, with slogans that were not whispered in the shadows but repeated in parliaments, broadcast at rallies, painted on streets so that flags could be trampled underfoot. He asked the room to consider what those chants truly meant and whether the world had taken them seriously enough. For 47 years, he argued, the rhetoric was not empty. It was preparation. While resolutions were debated and inspections negotiated, centrifuges spun. Facilities were fortified, missiles were assembled, and as he spoke, he claimed those same weapons were being launched toward Tel Aviv, striking civilian buildings and injuring innocent people. To Israel, he said, this was not theory, it was survival. The ambassador framed the operation not as escalation, but as prevention. The stated objectives were clear: dismantle nuclear infrastructure, neutralize ballistic missile production, disrupt proxy networks, and confront what he described as an existential threat before it became irreversible. He invoked the UN Charter. He invoked international law. He insisted diplomacy had been exhausted. But the deeper message was not about centrifuges or missile sites. It was about credibility, about whether the international community reacts only when consequences arrive, and not when warning signs accumulate over decades. Danon's speech carried an accusation: hypocrisy. Where, he asked, was the outrage when Iran armed proxies across the region? Where were the emergency sessions when dissenters inside Iran were imprisoned? Where was the urgency when missile stockpiles expanded and enrichment accelerated? Now that Israel had acted, condemnation was swift. But in his telling, the escalation began long before the first strike. He reached for history to reinforce his point. Purim, ancient Persia, a minister named Haman. Words that began as rhetoric but threatened to become annihilation. He invoked Queen Esther as the figure who acted before it was too late. He invoked Churchill, a leader who understood that concessions do not pacify aggression, they embolden it. These are not casual historical references. They are moral frameworks. When Danon connects ancient Persia to modern Iran, when he references the Holocaust and leaders who misjudged rising extremism, he is making a claim about time itself. He is arguing that history punishes hesitation, and yet, even as he defended the operation, he turned to the people of Iran with a different tone. "You are not our enemies," he said. He separated the regime from its citizens. He framed the confrontation as one against leadership, not a nation. He acknowledged economic hardship inside Iran. He spoke of dignity and destiny. In doing so, he positioned Israel's actions not only as defensive, but as aligned with a broader vision of regional stability. Whether one accepts that framing or challenges it, the message was clear. This was about more than immediate retaliation. It was about shaping the strategic balance of the Middle East for years to come. And that is what makes this moment so consequential. When a nation claims existential threat, it changes the calculus of restraint. When leaders invoke survival, they move beyond incremental diplomacy. Danon's speech signals a doctrine that waiting for undeniable proof of catastrophe is itself irresponsible. But it also raises uncomfortable questions for the global community. If intelligence assessments differ, if inspections were incomplete, if diplomacy was still technically ongoing, how does the world judge necessity? At what point does prevention become escalation? At what point does silence become complicity? These are not questions resolved in a single Security Council session. They are questions that define eras. What we witnessed was not just a defense of airstrikes, it was a defense of preemption. It was a declaration that when threats are declared openly, they must be taken literally. That words matter, that preparation matters, that history matters. And in the Chamber of the United Nations, an institution built on the promise that dialogue can avert catastrophe, we saw the tension between ideals and reality, between resolutions and rockets, between condemnation and consequence. Whether one views this operation as necessary defense or dangerous escalation, one truth stands out. The Middle East has entered a new phase. The alliance between Israel and the United States, as Danon described it, stands at what he called an all-time high. The message to adversaries is unmistakable. The message to allies is equally clear. Action will not wait indefinitely for consensus. History will judge this moment. It always does. But history does not judge silence kindly. As viewers, as citizens, as observers of global power, we must look beyond headlines and examine the principles at stake. Sovereignty, security, proportionality, accountability, these are not abstract terms. They are the foundations of international order. When leaders stand before the world and declare necessity, it is our responsibility to ask why, to ask how, to ask what comes next. Because the future of nations is not shaped only by missiles or resolutions. It is shaped by decisions made in moments like this, when rhetoric meets action and the world watches. Stay informed, stay engaged, and support our work as we continue to examine the forces shaping global power. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.